enlightenment. So I want to thank our sponsors, which is Pro Photo Daily, Epson, Photo Shelter, and American Photography. We have two terrific presenters, terrific photographers, Nina Welch Kling, who will be presenting second, and we have Kevin McKeon, who will start us off. I ask just one thing tonight. If you have any questions, put them in the chat room, and I'll weave them into the conversation. Also, I ask everyone, if you can, if you haven't, to subscribe to our YouTube page. And Kevin, share the screen. It's all yours.
Okay, great. What I'm going to take you guys through is, one second here. It's a project I've been working on for the last year and a half, called Life According to Rodeo. Now, this project began, I generally work on projects that are, I spend a year or 2 years on a project. And this one began with me literally getting in my car with no idea what to do next and just heading out across America, and just searching. And I stumbled across a black rodeo in Texas, in Fort Worth, and I thought that was interesting. So I went to this rodeo and I met a cowboy there by the name of Darrell Elliott, and he was back in this sort of staging area after the rodeo, and I said, I'd love to just get an idea of what a rodeo cowboy does. I had this whole picture of cowboys that as everybody does, full of cliches, and I pictured big ranches and cattle drives and things like that. But he said, well, why don't you come down to Beaumont, Texas? There's a whole bunch of us down there, and I'll show you a good time. And then he rode off, and I'm like, so how am I going to find this guy? So anyway, I tracked him down. Thank you, Google. And he indeed invited me down to meet his community of rodeo cowboys. There's about a dozen cowboys down there that are all very close and form a very tight-knit community. And I spent, a good part of the next year and a half going back and forth to Texas. I live in New York, and I got to know these guys. And what happens with me a lot with my project is that I start out with one idea of what it's going to be, and it ends up being something completely different. In this case, it became a story about community and the anchors that keep people steady in this kind of crazy world that we're living in. And for these guys, it's their community, their horses, their family, their rodeo, the weekend rodeo that they live for. So I interviewed them. I took lots and lots of pictures. And I kind of came around to this idea of putting their words to my photographs, because I think they work really well together and really tell the story of a different kind of cowboy than what you might think of a cowboy. So that's what I'm going to present. That's what I want to share with you guys. So I put this book together. I reached out to a good friend of mine, Jason Coxfold, who has a company called Nomad Books, and he helped me put it together, design it, find a publisher, and hopefully it'll be here by the end of May. So it's off to print, and fingers crossed. So
and Kevin, can we buy the book? Can we buy the book through your website eventually?
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing that I need to get. I have to reach out to someone I know who's going to help me put together a little bit of an e-commerce platform. But if you're interested in the book for now, just go to my Instagram page, DM me, and I'll make sure that you're on the list of. Give me your email and we'll work it out. Because right now I don't really have. I'm just terrible at that part, and that's one of the things I have to do a lot better. I've just been so excited about the photography itself that I really haven't focused a lot on the marketing of it. So I will figure out how to do that. But in the meantime, if you're interested, just connect with me through Instagram, probably the best way to do it. Or you can go to my website, or you can email me, and I'll put that in the chat as well. So without further ado. What happened? I just got a weird sound, just got really loud. Anyway, everybody still hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, here we go. So I'm showing it to you sort of as it is in the book.
Your screen.
Pardon?
Share your screen.
Am I not? Oh, I'm sorry. Pardon me. I apologize.
No problem.
Um, all this stuff.
There you go.
And now let me just minimize this thing. How do I? Okay. So, yeah, so the title of the book is Life According to Rodeo, because rodeo is life to these guys. And I'm not going to read you everything that's in the book, but I will read you a few things here and there that I think help illustrate how the book came together, the words of these cowboys and the photographs that I took. And this little introduction gives you a good idea of what this book is about. So I'm just going to quickly read through this. This book documents the lives of a small community of Black rodeo cowboys in and around the rural town of Cheek in Southeast Texas. The photographs are mine, but the words and the stories they tell belong to the cowboys themselves. I spent a good part of 2 years with these, mostly men and their families, traveling to far-reaching rodeos, watching them train in backyard arenas, hanging out in horse stalls, garages, and on front porches, asking naive questions and listening to their stories, their histories, their life philosophies, much of it recorded in the pages that follow. These athletes both exemplify and defy the well-entrenched image of our iconic American cowboy, holding on to a simple, independent, and richly rewarding way of life in stubborn defiance of our fast-paced, technology-driven, celebrity-obsessed American culture. In many ways, they lead typical working-class American lives, not unlike most of us in this country. Monday through Friday, they head out to their 9-to-5 jobs in warehouses, power plants, schools, and county parks as security guards, power custodians, or heavy machine operators. But that hardly defines who they are or what they're all about. The men I got to know are through and through American cowboys, much like their parents were and their parents' parents before them. Regardless of how they earn their paychecks, rodeo is the air they breathe and the blood that flows through their veins. It is neither a pastime nor a hobby, and to call it a sport is to acknowledge only a small part of its essential role in their lives. For these families, rodeos is an all-encompassing lifestyle, a deeply entrenched tradition that is fundamental to every aspect of their interconnected lives, from their deeply held personal beliefs to their strong community bond, to the love of horses and all that is outdoors. Rodeo is the glue that holds families and generations together, and it's the rudder that provides stability in a turbulent world. In places like Cheek, everyone rides. While primarily a male sport, wives and daughters also compete in events like barrel racing and steer undecorating, while also juggling family finances, event scheduling, ticket sales, and entry fees. Here, backyard arenas are nearly as common a sight as swimming pools might be in another part of America. And every weekend is a rodeo weekend. That could mean a professionally sanctioned event as far away as California or Colorado, or an informal backyard jackpot down the road and around the corner, where cowboys can hone their calf roping or steer wrestling, aka bulldogging, skills, competing against a few dozen neighbors, friends, and family members. On any given weekend, a rodeo cowboy might travel 800 miles to chase down 3 different rides in 3 different states, towing everything he needs to eat, sleep, and compete, horses included, behind him. Some of the men represented here are PRCA, that's the Professional Rodeo Circuit, card-carrying professional athletes. Others are just hoping this weekend will bring them one magical ride and maybe a new rodeo champion belt buckle. In the arena, all cowboys are equal, and the common enemy is a stopwatch. It may be the only sport where you compete to win and then assist your competitors, any one of whom might beat your time and you. There's no irony in that for rodeo cowboys because it's family. And that's something they said to me a lot. These men suffer concussions, tear muscles, break bones, courtesy of uncooperative livestock, and few will ever earn enough money inside the arena alone to keep the horses healthy and the truck filled with enough gas to get to the next rodeo. Theirs is not an easy life, but no matter what the week might throw at them, they know that the weekends will always bring family and friends, a cold beer or two, a little good-natured competitive trash talk, and at the center of it all, rodeo. Rodeo is life for all these cowboys, their families, and their communities. A life according to rodeo. So this is Daryl. This is the guy I met who introduced me to this community. And this was a quote of his: when I'm rodeoing, when I'm not rodeoing, I'm thinking about rodeoing. When I'm rodeoing, I'm thinking about the next rodeo. And that pretty much says it all for Daryl. I won't read you this one, but this one goes back into the history of rodeo. It's Charles Bird, who's just talking about how rodeo began on ranches. And it wasn't really a sport, or wasn't really a rodeo per se back then. It was just a way of doing ranch work. You learned to rope, you learned to ride bulls. It was all part of the job before it ever became rodeo.
And Kevin, are these rodeos with predominantly other African Americans, or are they? It's everybody.
They are predominantly they're everybody, but the community is 99% African American. So it tends to be a lot. You know, you'll see like 10% will be white, and the rest is black cowboys. That's just the community they live in. But they also compete they also compete out of their community in rodeos where they might be the only black people at the rodeo, where everyone else is white. It's still a bit of a segregated sport, you know. You never see anything resembling 50-50. It's either like a few white people at the black rodeo or a few black people at the white rodeos.
And is it promoted that way?
No, you know, I've asked them about that, and you know, they're kind of not. They don't kind of want to talk about it that much. There's one quote in here that where Daryl is just talking about how when it comes to rodeo, you know, it's family, whether you're black, you're white, where you're from, what your religious pursuits are. If you're part of rodeo, it's family, but it tends to be like it's a tight-knit community. I mean, these are all independent athletes who come together in small groups. And they tend to, you know, they tend to congregate within their own race, just the way it is. It used to be extremely racist, and there's a lot of, you know, the black cowboys were at one point not even allowed to compete while the white cowboys were in the arena. The white cowboys would compete, they'd empty the arena, and then the black cowboys would have to compete at the end in an empty arena. And it became, you know, it's you're timed on a stopwatch. So sometimes the black cowboys stopwatch, you know, kind of didn't turn off quite on time. So there was a lot of that, but it's come a long way, but it's still, you know, it's not, I wouldn't say it's purposefully black and white separated, but it tends to just fall that way. And I think it's a lot of it's just the communities where the rodeos are held, frankly. Anyway, this is Eddie Bird, and I think this, to me, like, is what these guys are all about. He says, before I bought any kind of car or was doing anything, me and my dad, we just had a 2-horse trailer, a camper on back of the truck, no air conditioning, no generators, no nothing, just a 2-horse trailer and a pair of pliers. And we said, you know what? We can build a world with a pair of pliers and a hammer. We showed up at the rodeo with just that trailer and them horses. We was just us. We was ourselves. We weren't trying to impress nobody. We were just us. We just wanted to be cowboys. And I think that picture captures the pride that this guy has in being a cowboy. And then here are just some of the other cowboys that were part of that community. So there's Sherman Wyckoff on the left and Toy Jackson. This was taken at one of the rodeos I went to, and I just, this is just, I just thought it was a beautiful picture of sort of the layering of these individuals in this photograph. This is a group of cowboys. This is pretty much, it's probably a great part of this is 50% of the community I really got to know, and they're just waiting, they're hanging out for a rodeo to begin in their local arena. As you can see, they don't look, they don't dress, they're not, they're not, Hollywood cast cowboys, and that's what I loved about them. They're just guys who love what they do. They're not trying to pose for anything.
And Kevin, how
Yeah.
hard was it for you to get into that world?
You know what? I never could have done it without this guy, Daryl, who I met in Fort Worth. I mean, he basically walked me door to door and introduced me to everybody. I don't know why he immediately had such incredible faith in me. I'm white. I'm an older guy. I'm from New York, but he just trusted me right from the start. And I think he was just, some of them have said things to me like, nobody's ever really cared about us before. Nobody's ever come down here and even wanted to take a picture of us doing our thing. So I just think it was it was an opportunity for them to have their moment in the sun, and they were just super appreciative of it. They're all like really nice people. There's a couple of them in the group that were less, kind of less, wanted to hang out and talk so much. Maybe they're just not talkative people. Maybe they just were, I just want a rodeo, but most of them are super, super friendly. And as this quote here says, in this area, the rodeo cowboys down here, it's kind of like it's all we have down here. And a lot of people who aren't cowboys, but who want to be, they kind of look up to us. They kind of come to us for mentorship. It's kind of like a tradition down here. Like if you have animals, if you have horses, if you like rodeos, you want to follow the footsteps of the ones who paved the way. So it is this little kind of mecca of mostly steer wrestlers, frankly. And most of them third, fourth generation, some of them go back even farther. This is Charles Bird, one of the other cowboys I met.
And do you feel, Kevin, like you're the first person to document this?
Oh yeah, I think, someone once told me when I was sharing some of my early work in this project, she said, you have your subject, you don't yet have your story. And I think it's the story that this project is what makes it different, and what makes it, for me, very personal and very unique, because I think it's not really a bunch of photographs about rodeo people. It's about a life that gives these guys so much meaning. And that only came really by just spending a lot of time with them and listening to them talk about how much rodeo means to them, how much their horses mean to them. These guys spend $20,000, $30,000 a year maintaining their horses, and they barely make more than that, so they love this sport, and it's the anchor that kind of gets them through the week.
But the book will end up being a historical piece.
Yes, I think it will be. I think it'll be, I mean, it's to me, like it's adding a chapter to the American cowboy story. These sort of small town working class, like I was saying, like they all work 9-to-5 jobs. They're normal working class people, but they get up in the morning before they go to work, and it's tend the horses. They come home from work, and it's ride the horses and train the horses, and their mind is always on the weekend. So to me, it's a fresh way of looking at what rodeo is and means. And I mean, imagine doing something so simple as shooting out of out of a chute at a rodeo and tackling a steer. And that's all you do. You do that over and over and over and over. And but it's something that, they practice it, they do it, they watch it on television. It is such it goes so beyond just like somebody who, plays a sport. I mean, it's so integrated into their lives, and their, when they get together, it's all they talk about. So yeah, I do think it's hopefully people will see it as another side of what it means to be a cowboy, of what rodeo really is, and why it's so valuable to these people. I mean, this is a guy just Kevin Carmen just talking about how, like what a weekend, what he does on a typical weekend. He says, this last weekend, we left here, we drove to Crockett, Texas, we rode there, we left Crockett, we went over to a buddy's house in Carthage, we stayed there, dropped some horses off. Then the next day we went over to Jacksonville, Texas, rode there, left Jacksonville, went straight to Fort Worth, rode one the next morning at Fort Worth. Then the same night we had to be back in Carthage to run one at the pro rodeo. And then that night, right after the pro rodeo, we drove home 3 hours. Now that's a weekend. That's a full weekend right there.
And
Just
what
some
are you
other
shooting with, Kevin?
I have a Nikon Z7 with a lot of lenses that I get from Borrow Lenses, depending on what I need. But yeah, I use a Nikon Z7. And it's served me well so far. Again, on the left, that guy, does that look like what the typical person imagines a cowboy to be? No, but I love that about him. He's presenting himself with incredible pride, loves what he does. And Robert Herbert Jr. on the right. Just another Brandon Harrison. He's another guy I got to know really well. Now this is some of these guys. It's tell me if I'm doing too much reading, but I think the stories are so wonderful that these guys tell. This is Robert Goodman talking about what it was like just growing up. He lived. I mean, he grew up in this tiny little, humble little house with his own little rodeo arena in the backyard. And he says, as kids, we would get whoopings once a week. We'd be doing something we ain't supposed to be doing, riding our daddy's cattle or mama cows, or riding them horses when we ain't supposed to be riding them. And they'd catch us all the time. That was the whole beauty of being in the country. That's the whole point of it. You got to be doing what you can't do. That just makes you a better cowboy. Where we lived, it was 3 streets. You get caught on one street, you get a whooping. You get caught, you go 2 more streets. You got 2 more streets to go till you get home. They would make a call. So what happens is the first person would make a call, and everybody on your way home would be aware that you're in trouble. They would make a call, and every stop you make, you'd get a whooping, because everybody knew everybody. But you could go anywhere. Nobody locked their doors. You could go in anybody's house and eat. And at so many houses, you smell food. You just go, what you got? Oh, you want something to eat? You'd sit down, you eat, you get your whooping, and you go home. So there was all that love, but you're still going to get that whooping. So I love that story.
Yeah. Question.
Yeah.
I mean, what could the prize money be at a rodeo? One from one extreme.
It depends. Like I said, a lot of these guys, there are a handful of them that make 6 figures. I mean, not these guys. I would say among the group, Daryl, who's a professional rodeo cowboy, he might make 25, 30,000 on a great year. Most of them, at these little local rodeos, like these kids sitting here, they're at a jackpot, which is kind of a neighborhood backyard rodeo. They collect $20, $30, $40 from everybody who competes, and the winners in the various events share that loot. And it's, they go home with a couple $100.
So Kevin, for us, is this like AAA, the minor leagues? I mean, where are they to the big show?
Some of them are in the big show. Kevin Carmen is made it to the national rodeo finals. Um, so one of the really things I think is really beautiful is that there isn't like AAA, minor leagues,
Right.
major leagues. Within their community, they all compete equally. One guy, as I said, is just hoping to win a belt buckle that weekend. Another guy might be a professional rodeo cowboy, but they still compete within their community, top to bottom equally, because the stopwatch, as they say, is the common enemy. So there are ranges and there are rankings where it's like you can go to the professional rodeo site and you can see number 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's all based on winnings. There are some, not among this particular group, but there are cowboys who literally are on the road all year, just going from rodeo to rodeo to rodeo to try to build up their winnings, try to get up in the rankings, try to make it to the finals. Most of those guys are pretty young. But this is a completely, like, it's so inclusive. I mean, there are guys here who are still 50 and 60, still competing with guys who are 20. There are guys who, are never going to make a lot of money competing with guys who, have a chance to win some money at some of the major rodeos. But nobody's really getting rich at rodeo. Maybe a handful of guys. And among the Black community, not too many. I mean, most of those top 100, I'd say 90% of them are white. A lot of them these guys are, they don't have a lot of money. A lot of people have huge, the people who are really, really at the top of their game have ranches and farms, have a lot of money, have family money. They can devote a lot to the best horses, the best training. These guys are, they're kind of a more humble, kind of everyday group. But it doesn't devalue what they're doing one bit, because it is just as important to them and they work just as hard, and it means probably more to them than some of these other guys who have a lot more privilege. Again, this is a small town, 550 people, I think, in Chic. So, this again this points to the humility of this group. This guy, Ben Goodman, was a champion. He was one of the best. He's a little older now and doesn't compete nationally, but he was actually one of the best rodeo cowboys around. He's a calf roper and a steer wrestler. He says in the summer we had to we had a full rodeo outside, like with no animals. We would do roping events, we would do riding events. The bigger kids would be the bulls and the horses. We'd rope a milk jug. We'd have a full-fledged rodeo every day. And it was hot outside. We didn't know what hot was. It was all we had. So just, again, the humble beginnings of these guys.
And do you have releases on all these images?
No. But I do have all these guys knocking on my door asking me when they're going to see their book. So one of the reasons I just published the book myself is because I know all these guys, and some people were saying you have to have releases on all of the quotes, on all of the images. There are few people in the group who would be hard to get releases on, just because I'm not sure who they were. They were in crowds. So I don't know. I just took a chance and published it myself. Hopefully they'll be super excited and no one's going to come to me and complain that they're in a book. This guy, Elton Leday, he's sort of the elder statesman among the group. He says here, everybody's country. Everybody enjoys the country. Everybody always wanted a horse. Their parents wanted a horse. Their parents before them had a horse. The kids are coming up, so the kids want a horse. And it's all about the horse for these guys. This is just before a lot of the rodeos. Often there is a moment of prayer for the safety of the cowboys. Bobby Harrison, he's an older guy, but he was one of the top rodeo cowboys nationally in his day.
And do you sell prints, Kevin?
I haven't really thought much about that. I've really just been focused on telling this story in a book form. I would probably like to sell prints, but it's kind of first things first for me. And I just really was focused on the book.
You need a business partner, Kevin.
I know. I tell that's what my
You need a
wife keeps
rep.
telling me. And I keep offering her the job, but she keeps turning it down. um, this is a bull rider, Shane Simeon, who shortly after these photos were taken, broke about a dozen bones in his face and was very seriously hurt. It's extremely dangerous to ride bulls. Ashton Cole, another calf roper. Rodeo is not a hobby. It's a part of your life. You got to get up every morning, feed your horses. Every night, feed your horses. Make sure they have hay. Make sure their feed is right. To me, it's like having teenage girls because they're the most demanding and needing. It's kind of a funny quote. He says, I have 2 of those, and now I have 7 because my horses are so needy. They get sick and they get hurt, and they go to the doctors and vets. Same exact thing as having teenage girls. Teenage boys is different. You just let them go. They'll figure it out. So there's some country wisdom for you.
Yeah, you opened up the can. What is the family life, for the wives who stay home and the kids who stay home and all of that? Did you get any sense of that?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, all the kids are on horses. Everybody's on a horse from the minute they can stand. The wives are, and you'll see this in a later spread, but the wives tend to be the business partners. Some of them are riders as well. Some of them do barrel racing and some of the other events, but most of them manage, the horse, the men, for the most part, are the athletes. The wives are doing the entry fees, the scheduling, the accounting. They're kind of like,
it's an all in
oh, oh yeah,
experience.
it is beyond all in. I mean, it is all about rodeo. I mean, it's these guys will say they couldn't do it without their wives. I mean, because that's just not, it's, like I could never be an accountant. The wife has a role, they have a role, everybody in the family has a role. The kids grow up learning responsibility and accountability through, the responsibilities you just have with a horse. And it's a great way that they use the horse to teach the kids a lot of values as they're growing up. The horses have to get fed every day, no matter what. So this is just another shot of Darryl. Again, this is Robert Goodman. He says, it's all I do really is ride horses. It's hot, cold, raining, I ride. My brothers, they go on trips and all, I'm riding horses. They're seeing the world, I'm riding horses. That's Robert Goodman. You learn to ride at home first. Then it's rodeo, football, basketball, track, and baseball. You've done all sports. If you weren't playing basketball, you'd work cows, ride horses. If you weren't playing football, you get on a horse, you work the cows, cut hay. You couldn't get away from it. Everything starts with the horses. Everything else, you want to play football, first you take care of the horses. Go fix the horses, whatever was your chore. So again, all this responsibility that comes through the care and feeding of their horses.
So Kevin, I mean, from your writing and your reading, how do you have time to take such beautiful photographs?
Well, I'm not
even without the copy, these photographs are beautiful, tremendous. But your reporting end of this is so compelling as well. How did that sort of develop for you?
Well, these are all their words, not mine. So I kept a tape recorder, and I would come home. I'd go down to Texas for 10 days or so, and I'd come home and I'd go through those tape recordings and I'd write it all down, and I'd pick out little nuggets and I would pair them with the imagery. Like, here's this kid, he's got his football shirt on, but there's no football until you do your horse's chore. So a lot of it was just, it's a lot of hard work. I mean, I spent a lot of time with these guys. And, it took a while for them to be as comfortable as I hope you're seeing in the imagery, where they just sort of, I'm just part of the scenery, and I'm not a interloper in any way. And, I went to a lot of rodeos, I'll tell you that. And I just would hang out with them. And I always had my camera with me, and they'd kind of forget I'm there, and I just start taking pictures while they're feeding their horses, while they're doing this or doing that. And
Because it becomes such a well-rounded story when you have their words matched with beautiful imagery, matched with beautiful layouts. I mean, the whole thing really comes
yeah,
together.
well, the layout credit goes to Jason Coxfold. He designed this for me and did a beautiful job. But yeah, I mean, I'm a writer by trade. I spent the first 3 decades of my working life as a writer and creative director in advertising before I really got into photography. So I love words. And I don't know, I love the lessons that these guys were expressing through the words. And then it was kind of like some of them is just got kind of lucky. I thought some of them they paired up really well with the photographs. The photographs weren't taken necessarily with the words in mind. It was just going through thousands and thousands of photographs and all the quotes and mixing and matching and looking at them and reshuffling them and
And how many images in the book?
I think there are about 60, 65 images. I think the book's about 115 pages. So again, there's some, I have some rodeo kind of action things in here, but I didn't put too much of that in here because I don't think this isn't a book about, rodeo per se. It's more a book about the culture of rodeo. So.
And you always shot black and white, Kevin?
Well, they're shot in color.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I played around with color, played around with some sort of measure of kind of giving them a little sepia. And to me, I don't know, they kept going back to black and white. There's just something so primal about it that I really liked. And most of my work is black and white. These two, I just love the way they work together. This is a barrel racer, and that is an amazing sport if you ever get a chance to see it. That horse is under this barrel racer, and it's like they're completely one synchronicity. It was like you have to dodge around these barrels as fast as you can. You're going as fast as you can, but you have to be super agile. You have to be completely in sync with your horse. It's quite an amazing. And this is women's barrel racers. This is another. I love this quote from Kevin Carmen. He says, "Buying a horse is like finding the right dance shoes." And I think this photograph kind of does a nice job illustrating that. Like that horse is under you, and that is what connects you to the ground, and that is the final piece of the puzzle. And if you don't have, he said, like if you're wearing dance shoes that don't fit or don't feel you comfortable, it's going to impact your performance. And that's how you think about a horse. That's just a shot at Lede Arena. The saddles are very important to these guys. So oftentimes when you win a rodeo, you win a saddle and they'll customize it for you. These are two examples. The one on the left is from 2005, and the one on the right is a recent one. Both beautiful, but the one on the right much more intricate, ornate, but both beautiful in their own way. So this one, I thought this image worked really well with this quote. "Until you're involved, you don't know what it actually means to loan a kid your horse." To say, hey, I don't know this kid from Adam. I've only seen him at a couple of rope-ins, but I'll let this kid on my horse because he just seems like a new kid who's trying it, He's got some of the intangibles. He's got a little bit of the hustle that everybody's looking for. As a kid, you don't know what that horse means to that guy yet. You don't know the time, the extra hours, the overtime he worked to pay for that horse. The vet bills that horse cost him when he was having to pay rent the same week. You don't see behind the scenes of what that horse really means to that man. And for him then, on the principles of being a cowboy, on the principles of what rodeo has taught him to go, hey, let's mount this kid on my horse. I thought that worked really nicely with that kid just reaching out for that horse there. This is just Alicia Pierre. She's a calf roper. I'm sorry, she's a barrel racer. This is Robert Goodman. He's on a practice dummy. It's actually a mechanical bull that gets pulled along by a tractor. And he had some great quotes, this guy. He says, I'm 56 years old. People say, why are you still bulldogging? I love it. It's my prayer, my weed. It's like that. But that interesting how he compared it to his sort of, it's his, why people pray, why people smoke weed. It centers him, it grounds him. I mean, some of these guys, brilliant little thoughts I thought they brought to the party. So three guys after practice: Robert Goodman, Dylan Walker, Joseph Deal. It's just another great insight. You might not understand it fully if you don't know much about steer wrestling, but he says, you got 5 brains thinking 5 totally different things, and all 5 of those things got to be on the same page for everything to happen flawlessly. You got both cowboys, you got both horses, and you got a steer. It can go from good to bad in a blink of an eye. You're letting a horse run free as fast as it can while trusting another horse and rider that have to keep the steer straight. And then you got a steer with a mind all its own. And so again, it's much more complicated than you might think to be really good at this sport.
So Kevin, as you immerse yourself into this world, when is the point where you let it go and get to the next project? Have you ever done anything this thorough?
Yeah, I haven't followed. I mean, I marched for 15 months with Black Lives Matter women's groups. That 1 year after George Floyd was killed and COVID broke out, and it was a year of just all kinds of street protests, primarily Black lives, but also trans rights, women's reproductive rights. So I spent 15 months in the streets of New York with that. And it in that case, it kind of fizzled, it kind of just, it ran its course, and they just, the marches and everything just sort of kind of ground to a halt. But in this case, I still think like, there's one other shot I wish I could get, So I just had to close a book on it. And so this one is done. And now, of course, the hard part, what's the next one? So that's what I'm thinking about and pondering and trying to come up with. And like, it's funny because I see the whole world that way now. Like, what am I looking at that is a story that can be told differently? I like to do work that enlightens people, that brings some truth or, open-mindedness to the world. So it is hard to know when to stop, but I think I feel pretty good that this story's complete. Although, like I said, I can always think like, oof, if maybe one more weekend. But no, at a certain point, you've got to just say, no, on to the next one.
Because you can, I mean, from listening to you and hearing you read, it's in your blood. I mean, like you've gone over that threshold, which is a beautiful place to be as a creative.
Yeah, and I've done that with pretty much every job. I mean, I go as a photographer in the beginning, and then I come back as a storyteller. And that's trying to find that bridge. That's not just a collection of nice pictures, but actually has a cohesive story to tell. That's for me, that's the real challenge. My first real project I went to when I really dove into photography was I went to Coney Island to take pictures, and Coney Island, it's 1,000 people have photographed Coney Island. I walked up and down the boardwalk for an entire day until I saw a strange interaction between 2 people on one of the park benches. And I thought, that's going to be my story. It's going to be the way strangers, what happens when 2 strangers sit in a confined space? What's that dynamic between them, and it was really interesting. So for a year, I just shot people on those benches and watched strangers sitting next to each other and how they engaged with each other. And it was, so to me, that's it. It's like looking for the story that goes deeper than just nice photographs. So this is an example. This is Darrell Elliott, the guy who started it all for me. This is his wife. She's doing all the bookkeeping and accounting. She's crunching the numbers in the pickup truck while he is inside rodeoing. So again, to your point about it being a whole family affair. Just hanging out at a rodeo. Just a lot of hanging out with these guys. They just want to be together. Rodeo is, I wouldn't say it's beside the point, but it is a reason to get together. It's a reason to see friends. It's a reason to just, spend a night together. When it comes to black rodeo, when it comes to any rodeo, it's a family deal. Doesn't matter skin, town, race, religion. It doesn't matter. If you have the rodeo part of it, it's family. And that's kind of how. And this is, when you're not when they're not rodeo, they were saying like they've watched this particular film. There's the Cowboy Channel. And they've watched this rodeo like 50 times and said, well, you've watched it like 50 times. Like, why are you still watching it? He said, because every time I watch it, I see something a little different that I could learn from. It's all inclusive. It's a selfish sport, but the community and the family's so close that even though you're fighting to win, it's not about who wins and loses, especially in the steer wrestling community. We're so close that even when your friend wins, you win because you get to talk about it. So it's really just, they have this really great perspective on winning and losing. There's work that's hard that has to be done. There's hard work that has to get done. And you take wins and you take losses, just like anything else. Kind of breaking it down to simple things. I mean, just gives you an idea of how like really rough and physical steer wrestling really is. And again, it's like guys get hurt. This is Darrell, and he says, I've had 3 career-ending injuries. One of them would stop guys from ever rodeoing again in their life. I've torn my pectoralis major tendon. I've torn my ACL, MCL, PCL, complete knee construction surgery, left knee replacement. I broke my ankle. I have 7 screws and a metal plate in my ankle. How do you compete with all these injuries? And I don't wear a single brace, not an ankle brace, not a knee brace, not a shoulder brace. People ask how. You got to know how to rehab. You got to know how to take care of your body. You don't get addicted to the drugs. You don't get addicted to pain medication. You just work. It's a lot of pain, but how bad do you want it? I ran a steer with a cast still on my ankle, and I won the championship that year with a cast on. So these are tough guys.
And how many times are you in the ring all the time on those shots?
Yeah. I've had a few close encounters with some bulls. And I've been pulled out of the way of some horses. Sometimes I get a little too close, but yeah, they let me right in there. It's very open. They know me, they're just like, come on in. I mean, I'm just one of the guys, really. And it's really a great place to be. Access is everything when you're doing something like this, because you're not this external force taking from what you're seeing. You're part of it. You're engaged in it. It's a collaborative effort. And being welcome, it just makes everything so much easier. This is Bobby Harrison. That room behind him is every wall is covered with accolades, awards, trophies. He's got trophy cases like crazy. And he's super proud of every newspaper article ever written about him. He's got it framed on his wall. So this, these are like, this is where it all begins for these guys, these belt buckles. You don't wear a belt buckle unless you've won that belt buckle. The one on the left is a buckle that Bobby Harrison showed me that was bent in half. He was wearing it when he was riding a bull, got thrown off the bull, and the bull's hoof came down on him, and that belt buckle was the only thing that stood between him and that bull's hoof. It caught right between the two toes, or whatever those things are called, bent it in half, and probably saved his life. So interesting story there. Gregory Jackson, this guy died, sadly, in the middle of this project. He, well, I won't go into it, but he had a really tragic accident. It was very sad. So just some more. I'm going to run out of time, so I'm going to skip through a lot of these. Just images. The only reason this rodeo works is because it works for everybody. It works for the guy who has the calves, because he's getting paid per run. It works for the guys who are showing up from their 40 hours a week job, because it's their way to vent. This is one of the guys who raises steer. Skip by. I'm going to skip by. I'm almost done. So, rodeo could be a dying sport, especially in the African American community. It's getting really expensive to do it. And a horse is a lot to take care of. If we start losing all our kids to Xbox and PlayStation, who's going to go feed the horses? Somebody has to go outside. It's not something you can do from your phone. You can't do it like a ringing doorbell, let them in, unlock the door. You can't feed the horses like that. You got it. You have to go outside. And this is a young calf roper in training. And I think this is the final one. I love this quote too. It says, "You see what the world has to offer, and you decide to go back to the animals anyway. I've seen the way people act, and I've seen the way offices go, and I've seen what gets you to the top, and we'd rather be with the animals." Charles Johnston. And this is, I call this a little rodeo cowboy home decor. This is a little still life from Daryl's house. And just the final quote, I couldn't imagine doing anything else.
Great. Beautiful. So we got
Just a real, I mean, a really, really just a simple way of, these guys are, like I said, multi-generation guys and multi-generation cowboys. They're the family, the tradition. There's something just so pure and simple about what they're doing. Yeah, just really proud of these guys.
Yeah, Kevin, you have to take a peek in, in the chat room there. Everyone's really, really loving what you did.
Oh, good. Glad.
Really
Thank you.
loving what you did. And hopefully you can stick around. We'll ask you more questions.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, great. That was really, really terrific. Thank you so much. It's always nice when someone presents work that we have no idea about. And now you've shed light, and now like we all have a little bit of information about rodeos and that world. It's something you mentioned with the belt buckles. There's superstition also with hockey players. They will never touch the Stanley Cup unless they've actually won it.
Oh yeah, that's funny.
Right. I mean, like, there's these quirky things about.
It's another little funny thing when a cowboy, a rodeo cowboy wins the national, championship, they buy the steer that they rode and they set him free, to never be ridden again, as sort of a thank you. These little superstitions people have.
Great. All right. Well, let's let.
Right, thanks.
So yeah, stick around. Let's let Nina share her screen, and we'll get right into her work. Really terrific, Kevin. Very, very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nina.
Well, thank you, Kevin. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
That was amazing. And you said something about your Coney Island. You said two strangers sit in a confine of the space, and it kind of reminded me that it's kind of my project, but in a very different way. And so first of all, Frank, thank you and Projections for having me. And actually, I'm presenting two projects, and so I kind of cut it down a little bit. This project called Duologs, which I wish I would have come up with this title, but it actually means a play that speaks for speaking role for two actors. And I'm kind of grounded in, well, let me start first. I started photography about 10 years ago. My background is in fine art and architecture. And yeah, so about 10 years ago, I kind of rediscovered photography. I was painting. Of course, now my cat is coming up here. Sorry, everybody. And I ended up loving street photography. And so my body of work, or my work, is very much rooted in the world of street photography. But I see myself more as a conceptual artist that uses photos and topics from the street. And I'm starting with these two images. And so basically this body of work is always a diptych. Now, diptychs go back a long time, and it's usually used to kind of show opposite opinions, and it becomes one story. So I started taking photographs and accumulated a ton of photographs, and I don't know how many street photographers are in the audience, but you can relate how you go out and you're attracted to very similar subjects. So for me, it's always hats, it's flag, it's the light. And the one thing that I always look for is the idea of something magical. And I can't even tell you what this always is, but in my work, there's always something for me that needs to talk to me about that. So then I had a class project where we had to do a diptych, and we had to put together two photos. And somehow I took to it like fish out of water. Or now fish in water? I don't know. Sorry, it's my first language is German, so
You get a pass.
in any case, fish out of water. But I just love the idea of taking photographs that I had taken at separate times throughout the last couple of years. And so this project is about 5 years of photos taken on the street and pairing them into a new story. And while I go through this project, not every pair, or I tried very hard for each pair to have a different connection. And it's this story, it's almost like a musical score where you start with something that is kind of simple, like in these two photographs, where you can immediately identify what the pairing is about. So, you know, I look for the shape of the hat, the curves, but I also look at the tonal quality. And that's how, and this was really actually the first pair I paired. And I always kept it in the rotation. So this book was published about a year ago. But even then, I still held on to this pair because it kind of reminded me why I fell in love with creating these. Now, part of my pairing is always that I make these collections where each one of the photographs had to have some special meaning or something special to me. I like to say it's almost like a marriage where the two of them together become something better. But each one of them still had to be an independent player and had to give something to me where I felt it was a strong photograph. And so I looked for a different connection as I did in the first one. Then in part of this entire project is that I also see them as pairings that, like an entry scene to a movie, where the viewer can kind of look at these photographs and take off with their own experiences. There's a lot of room for you to interpret what or why I'm putting these two photographs together. So in this one, it's less obvious in terms of formal. There's usually a diagonal connection, but I think they still connect in terms of they feel very timely together, even so they're taken at totally different times of probably 6 months apart or longer. Then often I like to find humor. So in between, you know, when you go through a bunch of pairs and you say, well, what is this about and what is she trying to say? I kind of like to throw in some sense of humor. And the way I usually shoot these photographs is that I will look for a interesting light source. And as a street photographer, you learn to know your light. You become an expert on where light, how it falls on Fifth Avenue or places that you tend to shoot quite regularly. So was, I think, on Fifth Avenue in the afternoon, and there was this one kind of spotlight where people would walk through. And then part of being a street photographer is to kind of look for what is going to happen, to kind of predict what can happen. And so I saw, the guy with the hot dog, but then, the guy with the tongue together, it becomes a very different story than if you would have seen each one of these photos not as a pair.
So,
So then I also,
Nina, so how long will you
Mhm.
wait? How long will you wait at a particular location for that other shot?
It really depends. The light will move. So in terms of in this case, because that was such a sliver of light, so after I would say 10, 15, 20 minutes, it's gone anyway. But sometimes 5 minutes, and sometimes I just get bored. I think it really depends on what I think might happen. And if I feel like, I'm kind of done, I will move on. And I'll show you another shot where I actually followed the person for 20 minutes. So I can be quite persistent in terms of when I see something that I think can develop into an interesting shot, I will stick with it.
So when you say move on, and that other pairing doesn't come that day, do you like have an Excel sheet saying I have, like how do you remember I have this shot, whether it's the one on the
So
left or the right, and that you can go back
thank
to
you. Yeah.
now I can pair it.
So I like to call it my mental Rolodex. Now that kind of tells you how old I am because um, Rolodex is just so it is really I enjoy this part when I go home and I can kind of think about what would pair with it, and I have a very good visual memory and I really enjoy. I also put them in separate collections on my Lightroom, and then I kind of pair them up and then I print them and I put them up together. Sometimes it clicks immediately, and sometimes I can't find a partner.
Mhm.
And then sometimes I feel, you know what, maybe that photo is just better by itself, which is quite possible. Also, you notice that I shoot vertical, which for street photography, because I'm more of a precise framer in terms of a single moment, works for me, does not work for most street photographers. It's not how, street scenes or stories are um, photographed for most people. But yes, it's a great question. I do love this kind of torture of going through my collections and thinking, in terms of color, what could work in terms of color, vertical lines. I usually will look for a shift in scale. So you will notice most of the pairs will have a shift in scale. So I will take a larger detail and a stepping away from a scene. And then there is these scenes where I feel like besides the graphic connection and the fact that they work on a visual level, there's often the question of how do nuns and what does a female sailor and a female or a navy sailor and nuns have in common. They both serve a higher purpose, and they're both female but in a very different way. They both wear uniforms, and so often there's another underlying story that I like to kind of feed into the pairs. But for example, these nuns that was on Easter Sunday, and I followed them, and I know that if the light hits the habit just right, I can get a much more magical photo. But I did follow them for about 20 minutes or 10 minutes down Fifth Avenue.
But this
And
really
then it was just, yeah.
No, I'm sorry, but this really relates to having an image in the back of your head because this is 3 years apart,
Yeah.
right? I'm sorry.
But I don't shoot for the pairs. So I do go out and I photograph, what I'm interested in and what I see and what I can, what I like to, what I'm interested in and where I find the magic. But then later I'm like, oh wow, the three stripes with the three nuns and then the habit. And what's also interesting is that most nuns will not have a white habit, like the head cloth. It's usually black. And I have this mental checklist of scenes that I'm interested in. So I actually have been looking for a nun photo probably for 2 to 3 years. I went with my family to Rome, and every time there was a nun, my kids like, Mom, there's a nun, because they knew that that was what I was looking for. I had these photos in my mind, and I just couldn't get the right nun photo. And then it happened on Fifth Avenue, where I felt, the symmetry of them and the way they walked together and how they were in synchronized. Just to me, that was my nun photo. And then I kind of let go of that.
And it's also nice, Nina, because so many times photographers will say during doing a projections, I got lucky. You never say that. You're following someone, you're waiting for that to happen. And you don't use the term I got lucky, because it's not about luck, right? It's about, just being dedicated to getting it. I love that.
I think it's a lot of, yes, I think there's a little bit of luck to be at the right time but you have to be out. Like when people ask me, Nina, like how, in terms of street photography, like how do you do it? And I said, you know what? You go out all the time, because only when you go out and when you look around, you will find something. It might not be that day, but in order to even have a chance to catch a fish, going back to the fishing, but you have to be out. So then, for example, here it was more of the idea of yin and yang, but again, the person on the left, I saw him out of the corner of my eye crossing the street, and I followed him until he delivered these balloons, because I had never seen these balloons. What struck me was that the minute they hit the light, they became translucent. I have a bunch of photos, I think, on my Instagram, where it was not in the sunlight, but I knew I had to catch them while they're just hitting that light to be transformed into something else. But yeah, and then I'm also interested, you can see that, so it's not just the light, but I'm always interested in movement, so details. To go to talk about the punctum, there's always something in these photographs that when I get home, I'm surprised to see. So, it might be the string that was flying while walking. So, that there was a certain speed to his walk. I mean, he was not, but I'm always looking for that little extra. And then there's moments, and then I like to become a little more, where you can't immediately tell what it is. And so in your mind, give you a minute if you can figure out, maybe you write it into the chat room, the photo on the left. And again, I was kind of interested in the idea of, a fur hat, and then it was fur of the dog that a person was combing, and it created the shape in the sun. But again, the sunlight made this shape pop out from the side, from the sidewalk.
And whoever gets it right first gets a book.
Yes. But so again, there is this underlying story that I'm always interested in, that and I think it's a kind of book where you kind of go through it the first time and you can be quite amused by it, and I think you can love the imagery or not. But then if you go a second time, I think you find other pieces that will surprise you. So there's always like other little. So then I always go to Fire Island. So this is kind of part of the New York, but moments they're just fun to capture. And again, I stood there for a while watching, what was happening and the wind and the person and people jumping. And people always also ask me, like, how do you get so close? And I just go close. I mean, people, and I anticipate, like, they were kissing for the first time, and I knew they were going to kiss again. I mean, they stayed embraced. So I knew I was ready for them to embrace and kiss again. And that's usually how I capture it. So the anticipation of the shot is usually part of the and so now that was over a year ago. About 3 years ago, I still in street photography felt like as I love to experiment, I wanted to do something a little different. I took a different lens, and I became interested in the idea of your peripheral vision. Like, what do you see? What do you remember when you walk down the street? Like, and why are you attracted to a certain image or a certain detail? And my detail that I'm walking will be different than another person's detail. And it's kind of street photography where you stand in a place, but you cherry pick pieces out of this photo, and then together they become this kaleidoscope or this mosaic of people. And I'm also interested in capturing people, and I'm just going to go through it a little faster. And the idea of that, how much do you need to see of a person to kind of envision that person? Now, I have to say, all the colors come from the background. So this was shot at Carnegie Hall in front. You can still see the brickwork, so that it's not a photoshopped colored photograph. I mean, how beautiful her just worked amazing with the background. But there's degrees of sharpness also in each one of the photos. And that's also the idea of what do you perceive? Like when you walk down a street, is it just a lipstick of a woman that captures your attention? And then when you come home, what do you remember of that walk when you wander? And so I have these certain spots in the city where there's blue walls and yellow walls, and I look for that. Sometimes you see the so I spend a lot of time in front of construction sites because you can see in the background the construction. But I also feel that these photographs give people this sense of gravitas. These are everyday people that usually are not photographed or portrait. I mean, again, these are candid photos, so they don't actually know that they're appearing in this. And so this is kind of funny because to the point that there are certain topics or certain scenes that I have in my mind. I've been wanting a bubble gum because I have that Mark Cohen shot in my mind of him with the kid with the bubble gum. And so this was just one of these seconds. And you can see, like in the background, you can see it was a red brick wall. I look for moments of gestures. And yeah, it's a love for people. And then kids are always very interesting because I know they will look back at me, whereas adults will just kind of pay no attention. Now, also, I'm very close to these people. I'm probably a foot and a half away from them with a longer lens, hence, why you get the blur.
And everyone is fine with you taking those shots, Lena? I mean, do you run into any kind of trouble, or do you explain yourself? How does that work for you, being on the street?
I rarely get into trouble. I mean, I think I'm not jumping at people. People see me, so they could walk around me if they want. If I do, and if I tell people, oh my God, the light looked beautiful on your hair or on your clothing, I think it actually uplifts people. And something, Kevin said, that people feel like they usually aren't photographed. And so I think when you say, you know what, you looked beautiful, it actually kind of builds them up. even with my black and white street photography, they feel like, oh my God, somebody cares, and thank you so much. And it's like, do you want to go back? But yeah, so this is the book, and thank you so much, everybody, for listening. And I hope you have lots of questions
Yeah.
to
Yeah. So and and we'll also put Nina's website address in the chat room, so you can contact her for a book, for whatever whatever you'd like to, or print. Do you sell prints, Nina?
I do.
You do. Great. Okay, so you have all that information there. And you also should just go through the chat room. You'll see a lot of wonderful comments about your work.
Thank you. Thank you so
But
much.
before we get to questions, I need to thank Linda and I need to thank Pat for bringing to my attention both of these wonderful, wonderful artists. Because you don't know everybody, and there's so many people doing beautiful, beautiful work. And if I didn't mention Pat Epstein by name, there'd be shit to pay for. And I'm not, I don't need that. Pat can get real ornery, like those bulls.
You don't want to mess with Pat.
That's it. Everyone knows that. And Linda is a sweetheart. So thank you, Linda. Thank you very much. But yeah, so what's the next projects for you, Nina? Like, how does that start for you?
So I'm still the Rallentando is still kind of a work in progress. I'm still kind of trying to how to pair it and how to. I mean, currently it's about 600 photographs that I just presented at PhotoFest at a portfolio review. I'm not quite sure where this is landing yet, because I still feel like there's work to be done. But I go out and as much as I can. I have a show in Germany next month, so right now I'm printing a lot. But I go out and then I make a discovery in something that I'm interested in, and then from that I kind of plant the seed and try a new project, or I have multiple collections where these are ideas that I've had for the last couple of years, and I might go back to them.
And your editing process, do you do that alone? Do you collaborate with someone when you're thinking about a book or thinking about a particular edit? How does that work for you, being you're so close to these images?
So for the duologues, my editing process was that I'm still in a class, and I'm still in this class, and so I have a class every week, and so I present my work and we talk about what pairings work. So I do get a lot of feedback, and I think it's really important to get that feedback, because it's yes, you're so close, and then you pair these photos up and you think, God, does this work? Does this? And sometimes it's a mess.
Right. And that process for you, is that easy for you to say when someone says that's not the right one, or that, this one is better than that, you're easy, or how does that affect you in letting go?
I think I might hold on to it for a little bit, then I print it and I look at it. And then if after a couple of months, I still feel strongly about the pair. So most of the pairs in the book had been a pair. They've been coupled up for, at least a year or 2 years, some of them. So that, to me, they stood the test of time in my vision. And some of them I'm like, like maybe they need a new partner, or maybe they need to be sent on a dating app and match to the right and left. But yeah, so I let go. I mean, I'm if you argue with me, or if you have a good point that I understand, I think I don't hold on that tightly.
How about you, Kevin? I mean, like, editing for that book, was that painful? Was that easy? How did that work for you?
I wouldn't say it was painful, but it was certainly a lot of work and a lot of rethinking, and especially once it had to be, you had to find the image and the words that work together. And how much of it should be imagery, how much of the words I should use. Am I using too much dialogue? I don't know. I'm fairly new to photography. I've probably been seriously working at it for 5 years, maybe. So I'm really, really focused on, learning right now. So, I'll put something together and I'll challenge myself and I'll think, well, I don't know, let me try it a different way. And then, so I constantly reshuffle and then trust my instincts to go back to something that I thought initially worked. But I would say it's painful. It's agonizing.
Okay.
But I would say, I love the process. I mean, I love the process. And when you hit, and I'm sure Nina would say the same thing, when you get the left and the right and they're like, that's perfect. It's such a good feeling. It's like hitting a home run. So,
And does your designer of the book have input into that? And like, how does that dynamic work?
yeah, no, he helped me reshuffle some of the images, and put it together occasionally, and also just it's good to have somebody that goes, you know what? Take these 3 images out. You don't need them. You already have this covered in another image. Because you can get very close to it. And I don't have a huge circle of photographers that I'm always sharing stuff with. So it was really good to have him come in and say, this doesn't work as well, this would be better over here. I'm not a designer, so he was obviously able to bring that dimension to the work, in terms of how it kind of presented itself in a book.
Right.
So yeah, it's sometimes as an artist or photographer, it's hard to invite somebody else into your work because it's like it's so personal and you don't really want that bad news, but it's a good thing to do. You have to force yourself to do it. I have to force myself to do it because, sometimes you just don't want to hear somebody say, I don't like that shot. But it's something you just got to do.
Yeah, but that really, I think for both of you, or for anyone putting together a book, and I'm sure Nancy could chime in if Nancy's still there, is that, having the guts to put it all out in front of someone that you respect and trust is really a big deal, because they're going to come back and say, this is better this way, and you've been living with it for 2 years and you thought it was perfect, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge test. I mean, Nina, that's got to be hard for you as well, right? Not painful.
Well, what was interesting when when it came to the sequence of the book, the pairs stayed together as one. There was never a question of tearing them apart. There was never, like, not my editor, not my, publisher, no one ever. I mean, they kind of bought into the pairs. And so that was kind of, that stayed as one the entire time. Now, where we kind of, it was more the sequencing of, we have a hat, we need a winter scene, or, so this story kind of moves through, I think there's 50 pairs in the book. So that's a lot of photographs to be paired, but it was never about that. It was more the kind of storyline through the book.
Mm. So Kevin, what's do you have any idea, Kevin, what's the next project for you?
Not really. I had this idea that it didn't really work out. My sister lives in Guatemala and she lives in Antigua, which is a kind of it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site and tourists. And I got this idea of there's a lot of people that come into the markets, like in a lot of these kind of countries, they come in and they sell their wares and they're dressed in these really beautiful, colorful, native dress and stuff. And a lot of it's for the tourists. And I had this idea of, I wonder what I wonder what it would be like to follow them home when they take the mask off. And, you could think about any place you go to, whether it's, it's Jamaica and, the people in your room who are making up your bed and are in their uniforms. And there's this thing that tourists have this sort of view of the natives as these sort of charming people, but I don't know. I thought it'd be really interesting to sort of expose the two and put them actually side by side. Here's what you see. but it didn't really work out. So that was just last week. So now I'm back in the starting gate trying to think of something else. I thought that would be really interesting. But it's another thing, like a lot of times, you just have to say this one's not going to work. I'm gonna come up with something else. And so I'm sort of at that point right now.
And Neen, what's up for you next?
I'm not quite sure. I mean, maybe another book,
Mm. So,
and
so you
that'll be.
so you go into a project already thinking that I can make a book out of this project?
No, what I like to do is I had the book project, and while I was doing the book project, I started this new project because I feel like I like to really engage in something creative at any given time and go out and shoot at any given time. So for me, just for anybody who's done a book, I mean, it's kind of it takes over. But so while I was doing the book, I started this new project. And so this new project is now about 2.5, 3 years old. So now I'm trying to figure out how to sequence it, or how I could wrap it into not wrap it into a story, but I have another idea of how that could go back to an idea I had earlier. And so it's always, I mean, I'm always conceptually planning around my projects.
Mm.
I mean, I know a lot of people, like I guess Kevin, you have an idea of a story, and then you go after the story. For some reason, I kind of go backwards. Like I go out shooting and I find something I'm interested in, and this is kind of the seed for something else. And then I kind of figure out in my head conceptually, or I create grids like I did with the Rallentando, like creating a grid, or there's always another level to kind of how can I put these photos together.
Mm. And to both of you, do you have, I mean, like when you're coming up with ideas, do you ever do like a brainstorming session with, a number of people or a salon where I'm thinking about doing this? What do you think? I mean, do you ever open it up to that, or is it very, coming in from your head? This is what I want to do, because you could do like an APA salon or an ASMP, get together where you have 5 or 6 people or friends, whomever you want, just to say, I have an idea. What do you guys think? Do you ever do anything like that?
I
Well,
do
we
it
got-
all the time.
Oh,
Sorry.
you do.
Go ahead.
You
No, I was just gonna say, I don't do it that formally. I test out ideas sometimes with friends and other photographers and creative people that I know, and but or I don't know. I do like to trust my own instincts on stuff a lot, because for me, it's a labor of love, and if I really feel strongly about it, I'm going to do it anyway. But I do, I give people a chance to go, that's a dumb idea. But I like to, sometimes I find the idea. It's not like I go out with an idea, like I'll explore, like I'll go to a black rodeo, and then I'll meet a guy, and he'll bring me there, and I'll learn something, and I'll debunk a few myths about what I thought it was going to be. It'll become something else. I'll get on the trail, and sometimes the trail doesn't lead anywhere, and you cut loose. But it's it's a lot of different ways that I come to ideas. It's not really, I don't have a form. I should probably do a better job of doing what Nina does, which is engage more in groupthink and sharing and stuff.
you
That's
seem to
just
be doing a great job.
I'm
Maybe
not
I'm
sure.
just way too insecure about my work that I need to like
Oh no,
find people.
when you're insecure, you don't share it because you're afraid to hear it. So I think
That's so typical. 2 artists are doing great things, and both processes are wrong for what they're doing. It's like
yeah.
perfect, absolutely perfect. Well, I like I said, if you guys have looked into the chat room, and if anyone raises their hand, has a question, now would be the time to do it. We've unmuted everybody. But I really, really do appreciate you guys coming in. And before we check out, and if, like I said, if anyone has a question, I just want to let everyone know again that starting tomorrow night, tomorrow, and then Monday and Tuesday of next week, we'll have 5 different photojournalists who are covering the Ukrainian war coming in and speaking about what's going on there and their last experience. We've done this now for over 50 presentations. So just and you'll get you'll get an email blast about it. I just want people to know. But if anyone has any questions or like I said, if you guys Nina and Kevin, if you look in the chat room, you will see a lot of wonderful comments, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. And when the books are all done and you have new work, let us know. We'll do an email blast to the audience so everyone can know where to buy the books and prints and all of that. It would be it's my pleasure to do that.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for
Thank
having
you.
me.
Thank you.
Really
Thank you. It was
appreciate
such a pleasure.
I have a question for Kevin.
Yeah.
I may. How does your connection to the industry, I mean, you have worked in advertising and all that, how does that help you today with photo assignments, or do you do assignments, or do you work in
No,
it?
I don't really do commercial work like that.
'Cause-
I listen, I would love to, if I had my life to live over again, I'd love to relaunch it as a photojournalist, but it's kind of past that time for me. Right now, I'm doing this for myself. I worked for 30 years for corporations and brands, and this is just for me. But I do, like most of the people, the photographers and the artists and the visual storytellers that I know and I trust and I ask advice from are people that I knew in the business. Jason, who designed my book, was a designer and art director, creative director that I worked with. John Doyle, as you know, John Mayo, he's a guy that I worked with a lot. So, it's I don't necessarily, I mean, I cherry pick people that have become very important to me throughout my career, and I stay in touch with them and I rely on them for feedback and advice,
Also asking because people like me are usually very jealous of a Rolodex that you have at home, because we have to work to get all these contacts. I'm an assignment photographer, but I also do books. So I do know
Oh, yeah.
books don't pay the rent. Let's put it like that.
It certainly don't pay the rent. Well, if it makes you feel any better, I also still do some marketing. So I do 50% of me is still doing marketing for brands.
Oh.
There's a couple that I work with consistently that I'm just close to and have relationships with. That part pays the bill because
Yeah,
this is not paying the bills right now. But as Frank Mayo said, I got to get better at the marketing end of photography. So I will try to focus a little bit more on that.
hire him. Just hire him.
Huh?
Just hire Frank.
Yeah.
No, actually, Stefan, it's an interesting thing. Stefan did a great project. And here's the book, New York, Keep Going New York on COVID. And through that book, he sent it to creative directors and friends that he had, and we ended up with this huge project for TD Bank from the personal project. And that's what I want to say. I had written it down, Kevin. There's a museum in St. Petersburg. It's called the James, and it's the James, like American Western art. I think presenting that because they have a gallery in that space for photographers. Your prints would be beautiful in there. I really, really.
Oh, I'll check it out. Definitely.
Yeah,
James Western Art.
Yeah, it's really a terrific museum. So, Nina, why don't you send us off into the evening with words of wisdom?
Pressure's
Always
on.
go out and that's tough. You know what? Go out and shoot. If you love photography, the only way you can find your imagery is by going out and shooting.
Would say it better myself.
That's
all I can say. Do what you love.
Yeah. And Kevin, you do the exclamation point on that. What do you got for us as we head into the evening?
I mean, listen to everyone, but make your own choices. I think that's as any artist, I think that's what you should do. You should be open to advice. You should be open to input. But at the end of the day, it's you, and express yourself, be yourself.
And I think it's like you do it because you love what you're doing.
Absolutely.
You know, so
absolutely.
forget everything else. Just, you know, you go out and photograph because you love it.
Right.
Great. Great.
Fantastic.
So
Really
again,
nice.
I thank everyone for coming. And you know, we'll see you Thursday, Monday, Tuesday, and then we have other presentations coming. And again, I really do thank Linda and Pat for turning me on to these two great artists. And
Oh, no.
we
You're
will
welcome.
we will see you, you know, down the road.